Let's talk about the manga work of artist Takeshi Obata. Takeshi Obata is without a doubt one of the most recognizable and most highly praised artists working in the manga industry today. Chances are, if you're a fan of anime or manga, that you've probably enjoyed one of his series, like Death Note or Bakuman. And while many of Obata's works have been released stateside, there are many works of his throughout his lengthy, over 30-year career that have not been localized and released in English. Now, similar to the video that I did a few months ago focusing on Junji Ito and all of his works, I want to use this time to explore the bibliography of Takeshi Obata and talk about not just the releases that we have in English, but everything that has not been localized as well. In this video, I'm going to be going through all of his works in chronological order from the beginning of his career in 1985 all the way to his most recent works this year of 2021. Along the way, I'm going to explore those works by talking about some of their plots, their lengths, the years that they were written, stuff like that. And for the things that are available in English, I'll be showing my copies of those on screen. I'll also try to give information about anime adaptations and any other additional info about these things that I can, but if there's anything that I miss, please let me know. Keep in mind that I'm only talking about his manga works and his serialized works, so I'm not talking about stuff like the art that Obata did over on the Castlevania Judgement game for the Wii. But if there's anything in this video that I happen to miss, please go ahead and comment down below to let me know if there's any manga that I didn't mention. With all that said, let's talk about Obata's career going back to his first work in 1985. At the young age of 16 years old, Takeshi Obata had his first published work in the Shonen Jump Spring Special of 1986. This story, called 500 Konen wa Shinwa, actually won Obata the Tezuka Award. Now, I couldn't find any information about what the plot of this story actually is, but looking at the artwork, which is very different than what Obata's artwork would eventually become, which makes sense considering that this piece is over 30 years old, but it does look like it's probably a sci-fi story. Now, if you are interested in having this piece in your collection physically, you can find that 1986 Spring Special on eBay and places, but it does fetch a pretty high value. Now, a few years later, in 1989, Obata would publish another work that he both would write and draw, just like he did with the one-shot, called Cyborg G-Chan G, or Cyborg Grandpa G. Cyborg Grandpa G is a gag comedy manga that was published across 4 volumes. The story focuses on an old man, a grandpa, who has turned himself into a cyborg, and in the first chapter we're introduced to the character, and he's a farmer, so he reveals to his family that he's turned himself into basically this agricultural cyborg that can use all of the mechanical elements in his body for farming and stuff like that. The feeling of the comedy here reminds me of the currently weekly series Me and Roboco that's in the Weekly Shonen Jump manga, but of course it has more detailed and realistic artwork from Obata as opposed to the cartoony artwork that you find in Me and Roboco. Next, in 1991 and ending in 1992 was the series Arabian Lamp Lamp. Now, Arabian Lamp Lamp is more of an action shonen series, and this is the first series in which Obata joins a writer, which is the way that the rest of his career has been, where he provides the artwork for another writer's story. The writer in this case being Susumi Sendo. Arabian Lamp Lamp focuses on a young boy whose sister's soul is stolen from her by an evil djinn of the moon. And he decides that to rescue his sister, that he has to find a lamp that's holding the gentle genie named Rampo. So he finds the lamp and unleashes Rampo and requests that Rampo help him to find his sister's soul to fight off against the moon djinn. And Rampo quickly is like, "I'll do it if you let me eat you." And the kid's like, "That's fine, whatever, I just want to save my sister." Rampo is introduced to the soulless sister and immediately is stricken by her beauty and agrees to help the child in rescuing her. So this one ran for 3 volumes and definitely has a different feel since it is an action series in the previous series he worked on. But this is the series of all the stuff that has not been localized and released in English. This is the one that I would love to see released physically the most. From 1992 to 1993, Obata worked on another series with another writer, and excuse me, I'm going to have to read this one off because I can't memorize the title, but it is Chikarabito Densetsu Oni wo Tsugu Mono with writer Masaru Miyazaki. Now this one ran for 3 volumes as well, and I could not find any information about it on the internet to talk about what the plot is or even read any part of it. However, from the covers, you can see that it seems like it's about sumo wrestling. The covers as well that I'm going to be showing in this video, it looks like his style has really evolved quite a bit from the previous series, but I'm not sure if the covers that I've found are drawn later on or if they were the covers originally released with this series when it was first published in its 3-volume format. Either way, it is a pretty detailed painterly style that he uses for the sumo wrestlers on the covers of this series. Now, a couple years would pass, and in 1995, and ending in 1996, we would have another series where Obata would actually join the same writer that was working on the sumo wrestling series with him, but this writer is now using a pseudonym and calls themselves Sharakumaro. The series' Japanese name was Karakurizoshi Ayatsuri Sakon, and in English it's known as The Ventriloquist Sakon. Now, this series is actually pretty important when talking about the career of Takeshi Obata because it's actually the first series of his that was adapted into an anime. And if you look on YouTube and just search Ventriloquist Sakon, you will actually find the intro to this series, which explains the plot and stuff, much like a lot of anime intros did. And it is in English. I don't know if the anime was actually released in English. I couldn't find that information per se. However, that intro on YouTube is actually in English, so it's pretty interesting if you want to see kind of what that looked like. It definitely doesn't have the same style. It doesn't completely match the style that Obata uses in his more popular series later on, but it is an interesting looking series where we have a ventriloquist or a puppeteer named Sakon and his puppet Ukon, and with the puppet of Ukon, Sakon is able to solve some grisly crimes like murders and stuff like that. So it is a short kind of detective series. The anime was actually a full 26 episodes, even though the manga was only 4 volumes. Now, at this point in Obata's career, we start to get to the works that have been released in English. And honestly, most of the stuff from this point on has been released physically in English, just outside of some one-shots and stuff that we haven't seen published physically, officially in English. Starting in 1998 and running all the way until 2003 would be Takeshi Obata's longest series to date, and that is Hikaru Nogo. The series, written by Yumi Hoda, was the first of Obata's works that we would actually see released in English, as this title, Hikaru Nogo, was used as the replacement in the monthly Shonen Jump magazine for Akira Toriyama's Sandland, which was only a single volume series. So sometime within like the second year of the monthly Shonen Jump magazine's original run, we started to see Hikaru Nogo join the magazine. And that was my first exposure to that series and also to Obata's works. So here we have the physical English release of the entire series of Hikaru Nogo, all 23 volumes. And some of these I definitely bought used, and some of them are ex-library copies, so excuse the fact that they're not all in perfect condition. The series itself follows our main character of Hikaru, this young boy right here, and we can kind of see this is the style that we really start to know from Obata, using, like I mentioned early in the video, modern Japanese fashion with the characters that he draws. Now, the main character, Hikaru, finds in his grandpa's shed an old Go board. And upon messing with that Go board, he winds up finding that there is a spirit within that board called Sai. And Sai is an old Go player from centuries ago that basically has been haunting this board and just wants to play Go. So we wind up in this situation where basically the spirit winds up pestering Hikaru to play Go. And eventually Hikaru gives in and decides, okay, let's go play some games. And he starts playing against other Go players, often much older than him, but he's playing at this like professional level, even though physically he doesn't seem to know how to place the pieces on the board the right way. So it raises some eyebrows. And eventually he does play with some of our other main characters in the series and enter into tournaments. He learns how to play a lot better, and as the series progresses, Hikaru goes from not caring at all about the game of Go to very much caring about it. It's a really great coming-of-age story that I really do recommend trying out, and while a lot of the volumes right now might not be that easy to find physically if you're interested in buying them, the entire series, all 23 volumes worth of material, is available to be read on the Shonen Jump app. As well, Hikaru Nogo did get adapted into an anime with 75 episodes, and it did actually air on Toonami in the US. So after the conclusion of Hikaru Nogo in 2003, which was really the first huge success for Obata as a creator, he did a short 2-chapter story with writer and director Otsuichi. And this was called Hajime. Like I said, Hajime was just 2 chapters, and this focuses on a couple of kids who basically blame something bad that happened on an imaginary person called Hajime. So basically at that point, any time that something bad would happen, that a kid would do something bad in their class, everyone would always blame Hajime, this person that didn't exist. Then one day when they're out exploring in like the sewers or something like that, they find someone who looks exactly like this person that they called Hajime. And the kids freak out because all of a sudden Hajime is real. And this girl is like, yeah, I am Hajime. So it's a short story. It's actually pretty enjoyable, just 2 chapters. I enjoyed it. It would be really cool to see it actually collected and released in the US. There are a lot of these short stories and single chapter, like one-shot stories that I'd love to see Viz do a compilation of, but I'll talk about the rest of those a little bit later, because next is what's probably the most popular and most well-known work of Obata's, and that is, of course, Death Note. Obata's psychological thriller Death Note is probably his most well-known work of all time. And likely if you know one thing that he's done, it's probably this series. Now this is the first time that he would join with his frequent collaborator Tsugumi Oba. The series ran from 2003 until 2006 and was compiled into 12 individual volumes. As well, there is a 13th volume titled Death Note 13 How to Read that's kind of a supplemental volume. Now in the US, this was released across multiple different formats, including a box set that contains all 13 books, the 6 2-in-1 volumes, which are the ones that I have and will be showing off in a minute, as well as the all-in-one edition, which I believe is the highest page count of any physical volume of manga that's been released in the US thus far. There were also 2 spin-off chapters that came out after the manga ended, one in 2008 and another one just last year in 2012 that expanded on the plot and some stuff that happened after the ending. As well, there are 2 novels, The Los Angeles BB Murder Case and L Another World. There are live-action movies released in Japan. There's the anime series that lasted 39 episodes. There's a live-action series, I believe. There's a musical stage play, and there was the regrettable Netflix adaptation from 2017, and I'm very sorry that I reminded you that that exists. Now, while I did pick up the series initially in the original 12-volume release, I eventually did trade those out for these 2-in-1 releases. Now, the main reason being because these 2-in-1s are slightly larger, and I like the larger page size for the artwork. They are not as exciting looking on the outside. You can see it's an all-black cover and spine as opposed to the colorful covers that the original 12-volume set has. So especially the spines are not the most exciting part of the books. You can see that's basically how it looks lined up on the shelf. But I like the simplicity. I think the black edition really goes well with the theme of the story and stuff like that. And they also do include some really nice colored pages, and you can see the black trim of the pages on each volume all the way around. Each of the 2-in-1 covers also highlights an individual character in the middle, similar to how the spines of the single volumes highlighted characters as well. Now, if you're not familiar with the story of Death Note, basically we're introduced to our main character of Light Yagami, who is a Japanese high school student, a very bright young man who one day finds a Death Note that belongs to the Shinigami named Ryuk. And then there's Light from the first volume. Basically, the Death Note allows for, if you write someone's name inside, that person will eventually die, and Light begins to learn all the different rules about the Death Notes and what he can and can't do with it, and eventually decides that he's going to use this to create his own utopia by killing all criminals. Now, this eventually turns some heads, and people realize there's someone behind all of these criminals' deaths, and an investigation ensues, which brings in the mysterious and eclectic detective L. And L begins investigating who it is that's behind these murders, who it is that people have started to call Kira in the story. And we also have Light's girlfriend, Misa Misa. In my opinion, Death Note is really the series where we see Obata's artwork evolve into the recognizable style that it is now, as he uses it to create these very detailed characters throughout the series, and as well uses modern fashion from Japan to outfit the characters that he creates. I absolutely love this series. I know that a lot of people don't care for it after the first half or so, but I think it's pretty strong all the way through, and if you have never read Death Note, I do highly recommend it. It really bucked the trends of what shonen manga typically were, especially when a lot of the popular series that were in the magazine alongside Death Note were stuff like Bleach, Naruto, and One Piece, very typical shonen action adventure battle manga. And Death Note was very different. It was a long, calculated story about mystery and this psychological thriller with some extremely detailed artwork and really creepy looking characters when it comes to the Shinigami. Just to give an interior look at the artwork, this is some of the colored art from the first volume. You can see the detailed work that goes into the Shinigami Ryuk and the way that Obata draws his humans with light on the left. And some non-colored interior artwork as well to get a good idea of what Obata's style looks like during the story. Following quickly after the conclusion of Death Note, Obata was then joined with writer Tsuneo Takano for a series that is known in the US as Grodd. The original name in Japan was Blue Dragon Grodd, and this was a spin-off of the Blue Dragon video game. Now, if you were reading the monthly Shonen Jump magazine in the US around the time that Grodd came out and around the time that the Blue Dragon video game was coming out, then you might remember there was a large ad campaign. Like almost every issue had ads and different articles about Blue Dragon. And of course, the video game, which was released on the Xbox 360, featured artwork and character designs by Akira Toriyama of Dragon Ball. So of course they want to push that since Dragon Ball is such a huge franchise. But we did get the release of Grodd in English, and it was a 4-volume series, a fantasy series about a boy named Raul and his shadow named Grodd. And the Blue Dragon game and stuff, you have these creatures that are attached to you called shadows. I don't know all the details because I never got to play the game because I never had an Xbox 360. But I did read the manga back when it first came out, so let's take a look at those volumes. Grodd only lasted for 4 volumes total and was part of the Shonen Jump Advanced line. You can see the obvious style of Obata's work here with the characters that he draws. They just have more of a fantastical setting than what we got out of his previous work with Death Note. Now, these are not the original volumes that I bought whenever I was younger. These actually I recently repurchased the series, and it's not currently in print, but you can find, I think, 3 of the 4 volumes pretty easily if you go on like eBay and Amazon and stuff. And then I believe it's volume 4 that can be a little bit harder to find. It has really great artwork, and it's honestly been so long since I've read this story that I can't tell you much about the particulars of what it's about, but it is kind of a fantastical storyline. If you are a fan of Obata's artwork, I would recommend at least checking this one out just to see the way that his artwork kind of evolved going forward from Death Note. Do keep in mind, though, that this series does have the mature content label. It does have slightly more mature content than a lot of his other works. I think than any of his other works, if I'm being honest. So do keep that in mind. Here is the 4th and final volume of Grodd. Now, after the conclusion of Grodd, also in 2007, Obata was joined by legendary creator Masanori Morita of series like Rokudenashi Blues and Rookies, neither of which has ever been published in English. I'm just going to put this out there right now that they really need to be. But they teamed together for a one-shot story called Hello Baby, which was a pretty dramatic little one-shot. It's pretty heavy context there, but the story basically follows a young man who fails at his attempt to kill a Yakuza boss, and thus the Yakuza start to chase after him, and he's on the run alongside his brother and his pregnant girlfriend. Some drama ensues, and it has a pretty heavy ending. And then in 2008, Obata joined with writer Nisio Isin for a one-shot called Uroboe Uroboros. And honestly, I read this back in 2008 when it first came out, and I do not remember a thing about it, so I went and tried to reread it, and I still didn't really get much out of it. There was some cool artwork, though, I will say that. I just didn't really vibe with the story at all. And 2008 brings us around to another one of Obata's biggest, most recognizable, and most praised stories, Bakuman. Now, Bakuman lasted for 20 volumes, it ended in 2012, and this was the second collaboration with Death Note writer Tsugumi Oba. Now, Bakuman goes into quite the different direction than the duo's previous collaboration, leaves behind all the dark elements of Death Note for a more grounded coming-of-age story about a couple of guys who just want to make a manga. And this story I actually did read back when it was being published in Japan, but I never bought the physical volumes until recently when I did purchase the box set. And I'm very glad that I did. I'm happy to have this entire series on my shelves finally. While Death Note might be the most recognizable and most popular series from the duo, and from Obata in general, I believe that Bakuman is probably the most highly praised series that they've done. Bakuman was also adapted into a 75-episode animated series, which was distributed in the US by Viz Media as well. There was also a video game released for the Nintendo DS that was not released in English. As well, there was a novel called PCP Perfect Crime Party that was a little spin-off. As well, in 2015, there was a live-action Bakuman film released. So this one's had all kinds of adaptations just like Death Note did. The series is definitely a must-have for any fan of Obata's work. And honestly, for any manga fan, this is probably one of the must-have series that I would say. And it does have some absolutely stunning cover artwork with Obata's beautifully detailed style on each cover. As of right now, the box set of this series is in print and available, so I would recommend if you want to own it physically to spring for that, because it is a cheaper option than grabbing the individual volumes. However, it is also worth noting that the series is available to read on the Viz Media and Shonen Jump apps, so if you do subscribe for $2 a month to those apps, you will have access to all 20 volumes of material from this series. Though if you do spring for the box set, you also get this Otter 11 book as a bonus, so that's always nice. Next up, in 2014, 2 years after the conclusion of Bakuman, came All You Need Is Kill. Takeshi Obata in this one was joined by Ryosuke Takeuchi, who did the storyboards, and this is based off of a novel by Hiroshi Sakurazaka. And this novel has more than just this one manga adaptation. There's also an American comic adaptation, and as well, there is the Hollywood film adaptation with Emily Blunt and Tom Cruise called Edge of Tomorrow. In Japan, All You Need Is Kill was released as 2 volumes, but in America it was just a single thick volume under the Shonen Jump Advance label, and it is an oversized trim, so it is as tall as the Death Note Black editions. This is a great sci-fi story. I really enjoyed this. It's not a very deep story at all, but it has a lot of great action, and of course, if you are a fan of Takeshi Obata, it has his fantastic artwork throughout, as he draws great human characters and alien characters in these action sequences. The story, if you're not familiar, is basically that there is a soldier who is in a war against these aliens, and when he dies, he is reborn at the beginning of the last day of the war, basically. And he is tasked to essentially, well, he tasks himself to figure out how to break the loop, which is essentially how to win the war. And this story is him reliving the same day over and over again, a la Groundhog Day, figuring out how to defeat the aliens and win this war, and how to break out of this loop. Now, from 2014 to 2015, Obata joined with Nobuaki Enoki for the series School Judgement, or Gakyo Hote. Now, School Judgement was a short-lived 3-volume series that was in the Shonen Jump magazine, and it followed, it's basically very much like Phoenix Wright. Like, the main character is an attorney, but it's for, like, grade school students, and so it follows this young grade school attorney as he defends his clients and stuff and reveals the truth behind various cases. Like I said, very much like Phoenix Wright, except in the grade school setting, so it kind of has the same feeling or vibe to me as like Case Closed, in which you would see, or Detective Conan, where you would see a young kid solving mysteries and stuff like that. Even though in that series it wasn't actually a kid, as you know from the plot, but you get what I'm saying. Anyway, it's pretty enjoyable. It's not the greatest series in the world. It is also available to read on the Shonen Jump app, so if you don't want to purchase the 3 physical volumes, you can check it out that way. It did only last for the 3 volumes. I believe it was 18 chapters total, and the 3rd volume includes as well the original one-shot with artwork by the writer Nobuaki Enoki, showing his original pitch and stuff for the series. It does have a decent conclusion, I would say. It does seem like they were trying to lead into some bigger storylines in this series, but unfortunately it got cut short, and it was fine. It wasn't a bad series at all. I would say it's one of the weaker series that Obata has been attached to, but I'm happy that I have it, and I'm happy to have been able to read it. Now, also in 2014, which was clearly a pretty busy year for Takeshi Obata, he did a one-shot called RKD EK9, along, again, with writer Nisio Isin. So this is 2 one-shots that they've done together, and Nisio Isin also did the at least one of the Death Note light novels, which Obata did some artwork for, so there is a lot of back and forth with them. This one-shot that's never been published in the US was basically about some people who develop a drug that can help you to get to heaven. And they outline like the different levels of heaven. If you take a certain number of pills, then it will take you to that place in heaven. And it kind of has a similar story to The Good Place, where you have to earn a certain amount of like virtue points in life to make it to various levels of heaven. And they've decided it's basically impossible for anyone to naturally earn those virtue points. So instead of earning them, they've created the drug so that people can finally make it to heaven. It's pretty good, actually. Like, whereas I didn't enjoy the previous collaboration one-shot with Nisio Isin, this one was really fun. If you can find RKD EK9 online to read, definitely check it out. I think it's fun. It has a funny ending as well, and you get a lot of great Obata artwork. And finally, this brings us around to the most recent and recently completed work by Takeshi Obata, once again joining with Tsugumi Oba for Platinum End. Now, Platinum End ran for 14 volumes from 2015 to 2021. The 14th volume is not yet available in English, but we do already have volumes 1 through 13. And as well, an anime adaptation is coming in October of this year, and it will have a 24-episode season, which should cover the entirety of the story. The story of Platinum End revolves around the main character of Mirai. And at the beginning of the series, Mirai is about to jump off of a building when on his way down, he's caught by an angel. And the angel gives him abilities. She grants him flight with wings that sprout from his back, and as well he winds up developing these arrows that come from his wrist. The angel explains to Mirai that he is able to use the arrows to make humans fall in love with him. And basically in that she explains that if he makes someone fall in love with him, then they will do whatever he wants. And in the first chapter, she explains to him that his aunt and uncle, whom he's been living with since his parents had died in an accident, were actually responsible for the death of his family. And she then convinces him to go ahead and use the arrow to find out the truth from his aunt. And he does, and she reveals to him that yes, in fact, that they did kill his family. Mirai, distraught by learning this, says that his aunt does not deserve to live, and because she's still in love with him, she stabs herself in the neck and dies right in front of him. Meanwhile, we also find out that up in heaven, God wants to leave his throne, and he basically tells 12 angels to go down to Earth and find humans to give angelic abilities. These 12 humans would then be competing to see who is the best to be the successor for God in heaven. And in the second chapter of the manga, this is all explained to Mirai, and this is where the plot really starts to kick off, as we begin to be introduced to some of the other characters who have been given powers by the angels. And we soon learn that one way to become God is to eliminate every other human who is in this competition. Presently, this is what I'm reading, so I haven't caught up with the manga, but we have 13 out of the 14 total volumes available in English, with that final volume coming out pretty soon. And I wanted to make sure that I showed every single volume of this series because in my opinion, these are some of the nicest looking covers that I have in my collection. And that concludes our look at all of Obata's works thus far, as Platinum End did end this year, and he's not yet done any additional work in the industry. We do, of course, have that final volume to look forward to in English, and then later this year, the beginning of the anime adaptation. So I'm hoping that with this video that I've talked about a couple of series that maybe you've never heard of and made you interested in some of these things that maybe you didn't know were available in English or things that are not available yet in English. For me personally, making this video was fun because it had me revisit some things that I haven't read in a while, and as well look into some of his other titles that I may have known about but had never really looked into or read any of at all. And it really made me wish even more so that Viz would release some of Obata's earlier works physically in English. I would love to see series like Cyborg G-Chan G and Arabian Lamp Lamp be published in English, but I would really like to see some sort of compilation of his one-shots and the 2-chapter story Hajime all together under one cover. Especially since recently Viz has been putting out more of these anthology volumes. We've had a recent one for Naoki Urasawa, we have upcoming books for both Akira Toriyama and Rumiko Takahashi. It would be really cool to see an anthology compilation like this for Obata as well, and I am absolutely sure that it would sell well with the fact that he is one of the most recognizable and most highly praised creators in the industry today. Thank you so much for watching this video and spending this time with me, and I apologize if, you probably saw me aging, if you will, a little bit in this video because it was filmed over the course of about a week, whereas most of my videos are filmed in a single shot. So my appearance might be slightly different in each take that I've done, and I apologize for that. But again, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was informative and enjoyable for you. And if you're not yet subscribed, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button so that you're notified of all the upcoming content that I put out every single week. And with that, thank you again for spending the time with me, and I will see you all on the next one. Peace out.